Have you heard a great story lately? Whether you were watching TV, a video on YouTube, or just having a conversation with friends and they opened up and shared a story with you. Those stories, especially those that just seem to find a way into your head, heart, and hands. I see stories as having power to inspire, educate, bring a connection forward that allows you to move into that story with that person and or with the characters that are brought forward. And when you are finding your legacy story, which I encourage all that are olders in their 60s, whether 50s and 70s, to find that legacy story or stories that they can share with others and that they can improve upon and focus and strengthen over time. There are wonderful ways in which to do that. And I have 5 ideas or 5 actions I want to share with you to support the crafting of your story. Now, I have found them to be of great value, and I have a couple that I use all the time. One called the 3 Minute Mentor, about a roadblock and a soldier and a machine gun. And I have other stories to do with projects and activities that I got involved with over the years, including spending time as a whitewater rafting guide and chatting with people from all over the world and what happened along those trips. So I wanted to just acknowledge that there is this power to inspire, to educate, to connect with other people. How do I craft my legacy story? And if you take a few minutes and just listen in, this is not going to be a long presentation. I want to hit the highlights and then open up possibilities for you afterwards. But how do I craft my legacy story? That's a question to ask yourself. And if you want to stop now and just think and write down a note to yourself, great. If not, let's keep going. And welcome. I'm Stephen, younger, older, elder legacy here on YouTube. Welcome. And I also have Wealth Movement, my company, Wealth, WELLTH, about well being and well living to the nth degree. And there's some stories in there of work that I've done around the world. But what we're here today is to take a look at these 5 actions that you could take and use as you start to develop your legacy story. And they have a particular order to them. You could move them around a little bit, but I would suggest you go through them as they're presented, and then you can come back and say, "Oh, I think I'll use number 3 before number 2, before 5." You can play around with it, and that's the great thing about these actions that I'm presenting to you. They're not absolute steps like concrete steps that take you into a building. They're actually path stones, and you can relay them as you wish, and they make sense for you. The first one to take a look at is discover your core values. And values in this sense is about what is your truth and worth and usefulness. There are things that are true to you and that you could share a story about them. There are things that are of worth to you, you can share stories about them. There are stories around usefulness. Bringing all three together and finding stories that blend all three, that's wonderful as well. Now, the core values that you might have might link back to confidence and courage. They may link to ethical values like fairness and accountability. So there are many different value sets that you can tap into and enliven them for the audience, because the audience are those that are present now and those that are still to arrive for other generations. So you're sharing your core values, and therefore, as you discover what they are, and I would encourage you to grab a journal and play around with that, go out into the internet world or books and just look for what are other values that people interact with or use, and just see what unfolds for you. And the great thing is, you might actually find some wonderful phrases to use later that you can attribute to those writers. Now, what happens when you're finding these values? You're also finding those affirming beliefs, those general ways of looking at it and say, I believe in this. They are great stories as well. Just as some people talk about the principles and procedures and practices, these are other words that they might use to say certain things line up, and there's stories there that are of value to others. One of the things that I have learned over time is that I may only be a chapter ahead of some people, and I'm sharing something that they find it of great value because I went through learning it and then summarizing it. So, what I was able to do is inspire them and educate them, and that's what stories can do. Now, the other thing that you may want to weave into this is look at the emotional connection that you have with the values. I'm thinking about three emotions in particular: fear, desire, curiosity. Fear is the belief that something in the future is going to cause you more pain than pleasure. The desire is something that lists out as I want this, I want to really bring this into my life, I'm going to do what I can to bring it in. And curiosity is being open to this wonderment and wonderment. And it actually embraces the fear and the desire and finds ways in which to bring them all together. Play with that one and see what happens for you as well. And let me know down below if that sort of tickles your fancy and you sort of go, oh, that's neat, or you have another combination you want to add. Now, these stories, these values, these beliefs, these principles, these emotions, they become the bedrock of the story that you can tap into. And the great thing is you may use the elements of that story that you have around the values, but you might vary it depending on the audience that you're sharing it with. And that's one of the great things is once you discover your core values, you can use them in a lot of different ways. And that's particularly important because there are those who are here listening, but also legacy stories through your legacy contributions and projects are for future generations as well. The next thing I would suggest you do is reflect on your life shifting moments, those course corrections, those adjustments, those pivots. What were they? And write down what you remember of them, both from the words that you would use to describe them, the emotions that are around them, and just capture that. It's sort of like being a reporter of the experience that you had, because it's with those words, those insights, that if you enliven them in your presentation, in your story sharing, that it really helps you to help others to learn about what's going on. Again, that inspire, educate, connect. Now, these events that you've gone through are shaping your life world and are shaping the worldview that you're going to be interacting with. So, again, as you bring your stories to life, there's this within me that goes without, but there's that without story that comes within. And what's taking place there? Because there are opportunities to understand what's shifted for you. In one of my trips overseas, as I worked in a war zone, and there was things that I saw from that worldview that came into me that I didn't always quite understand at the moment. But a number of years later, it certainly came to the surface, and I remember them now, and they helped me to understand the true meaning of patience, flexibility, and discretion. So you can probably appreciate there'd be a wonderful story that could be shared. And it's actually one of the stories I do share in workshops that I give. The, the important thing here to remember is to share the successes and the setbacks. Don't just gloss over them and just give the successes. Sometimes stepping back and having to go through a little bit of that, if you wish to go to Campbell's hero's journey, You're walking along and then you drop in and then you come back up, that sort of zero to hero storyline. It's okay to share some of those setbacks. There are things in my life, like I'm not going to just go out and talk about them, and share stories about them, share stories about them. But some of those aspects of my life do get woven in to what it is that I'm sharing. And that's okay, because I'm leaning into and reflecting on those life shifting moments in my life. It's, when I first encountered cancer a number of years ago, and I sort of had to go through a little bit of that. Oh, I'm by myself going through the surgery. Oh, there's no one in the waiting room when I get out from here. And I remember going, wow, okay. And I went and I left and did all the checks that I had to do. And then I ended up sort of becoming aware of the fact that I was sitting in my vehicle crying. And I remember that story. I don't share it very often, but that's one of those life shifting stories about what is the connection between being lonely and being alone. And that helped me to understand the journey that I'm on. And therefore, there are persons who could benefit from a story like that. And you have those. With stories, there is a story sharing structure, and ways in which you can present the story could be chronological, as 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and sometimes I do that. There's thematic ones, which could be, what are those big education moments for myself? Or when were those big outdoor moments for myself? There could be the milestones that you hit. For example, I've got a number of degrees. So I hit a certain degree at a certain time, and that led me to where I got another degree that led me to another place. And why did I get those degrees? I could talk about it through those milestones. You have milestones in your own life that you can tap into. The themes, the chronological aspects of activity, right? Another great story I could share would be what happened between Kathmandu, Nepal, and London, England in 1979 on a bus with 23 other persons. And what I could do is I could go grab my journal and we could sit and have a great conversation. And I could just open up my pages of my journal and read you excerpts of that and frame a story of travel and exploration and wonderment and wonderment and what I learned because of that trip. So you have that availability. It's in trunks and boxes around. It could be in photo albums that are sitting even right beside where this computer that you're listening on is located in your living room, whether it's on the TV or in your office. You'd be amazed what you'd find. It's just right around you. Now, here's one that's kind of interesting, and this is around an acronym, VAMPS, VAMPS. And what I'm getting at here is, in the writing of the story, remember your voice, your authority, your mastery, your position, and how you felt from a safety point of view. That's VAMPS. And when you weave those elements into your story, as you craft your story so that you can inspire and educate and connect with others, to have that vamps there really helps you to remember, this is what I can do. So I can share my emotions, my struggles, my victories, to be transparent and stay found in the story as I'm sharing it, to be able to give some anecdotes of what took place using that vamps approach. What voice do I want to share? What's my authority around this? What's my mastery? What's my position? And what's the felt safety aspect that goes with that? That's where crafting and writing down on a piece of paper, just doodling out what is the different elements of this. It doesn't have to go like down in steps. It can be something like a map, and just play with it and see what actually comes for you. The one thing that I would encourage you to do is to remember to edit for impact. You can edit for influence, which is a short term. But if you're thinking about your story and you're feeling your story, you're going to share your story, then do it through the premise of impact, that it has a longer view to it. And with your legacy story in particular, your legacy story is about a gift that you're sharing with others so they can learn from you. And when you take it from that perspective, it gives it a little bit more real good technical writing term. So it's that power, that essence of that legacy story that you have. And what you want to do is make sure that you keep trimming, because sometimes you end up with the story and you might find yourself go, oh, I could get that out of here, or I could get that out of here. If there's anything, again, that I've learned along the way is once I've got my story and I think, oh, I'm there are things that I trim out. I just find that it actually just makes it more concise and it deepens the language and the words that I want to use. And I'm all for simpler, deeper, better, wiser, kinder. And if the stories allow that to come to the foreground because of what I trim out, I'm there. I'll work with it. And also, can you get your story in the words or close to the words of those who are your audience? I have an issue in my writing sometimes, and I forget about it. And you may even felt it in this video, is that I have an academic background, and I spent a number of years in university as an educator, adjunct professor, and sometimes my academicness comes out to play. Sometimes my acronyms, my four finger, one thumb acronyms pop out like VAMPS. And some people just, oh, they don't like that because it's not in the language and the words that they normally use. So I always have to go, okay, where am I? Who am I chatting with? Who's listening to the story? And then I figure out how best to present it. And if I still want to use one of my acronyms, I have to load it in. I have to bring it forth in some way that the person has a bit of a heads up that it's coming, and therefore they're ready for it rather than being treated with some acronym and they go, what's he talking about? So, again, think about it from that perspective. And the other thing that I would really encourage to get resonance with your story is to ask for feed forward. Just like I would ask of you right now is in the comments below, is there anything you would like to share about this presentation in helping you craft your legacy story? Is there anything that I could do that would be a better or wiser or kinder for you? And is there anything that you want to share that ups the presentation? Maybe there's a great idea you want to share with us. I enjoy those comments as well. With those 5 actions that I've just shared with you, if you go back and just listen to each one and then do some writing that it sort of spurs you on, it stimulates you to think about, and do it from the perspective, okay, I can go share it this afternoon or this evening or on the weekend. But then think about the stories that have meaning to inspire future generations with your legacy story. For those who've not arrived yet, what story could you share that brings who you are to them so that they can meet you, so they can benefit from your gift? The legacy story is a gift so that they can learn from you. For me, that's an important element of crafting my legacy story. And I would encourage you to think about that as well. So, with that, best wishes and take care. As a reminder, subscribe, comment, and the 2 videos that are here, I thought would help you out in moving forward in this whole story of living a legacy life.